Hello and welcome to my channel. If you are a subscriber to my channel, welcome back and thank you for your interest and support. If you aren't a subscriber but you'd like to see more, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss any new interesting videos. The purpose of my videos are to rediscover the true history of people of color throughout the world. By understanding that truth, hopefully all people will be able to heal. I truly believe that remaining in ignorance helps no one, except for those individuals that thrive on deception, power, and dominance. One more thing before I get started, and trust me, you don't want to miss the rest of this video, but this has to be said. The word race and what it's supposed to mean is not a real thing. It was created to divide and conquer. It's a social construct which was scientifically debunked long ago, yet we still use the term day in and day out. Now, I realize that I've used the term race in some of my videos, but that was only because it's a term that people are most familiar with when trying to make sense of different skin tones. I will be producing a video addressing the peopling of the world in the near future, so please stay tuned for that. I produce these videos not to divide people, not to say one skin complexion is better than another, but to write the historical record, so we as human beings can move forward out of ignorance as a cohesive group, no one better than the other. Alright, so without further ado, this video is titled The Black Southern Confederacy. We have been given 120 plus years of propaganda that the South was controlled by white men, and the few black men that fought for the South did so on behalf of their masters. This, of course, is a lie. In this video, I'm going to show you that the American Civil War was fought by black men and white men on both sides of the conflict. Okay, let me show you what I'm talking about. For those of you that don't know, the Confederacy included the states of Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. Regarding the hierarchy of the Southern Confederacy, Jefferson Davis was the president and Alexander Hamilton Stevens was the vice president. The Confederacy was formed in 1861. However, on April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered his Confederate troops to Union General Ulysses S. Grant after 4 years of a costly and bloody war. All right, so I think this first article will blow your mind, so please pay close attention. I'm going to start off right at the top with the President of the Southern Confederacy, Jefferson Davis. Okay, so this article is from the newspaperarchive.com, Philadelphia Evening Telegraph newspaper, dated October 6, 1886, page 8, column 1. All right, so the title of this article is The Davis Family, the Residents in Canada, How the Members Live. So the article starts, Ottawa, CW, September 27th. After the late war, the Davis family, excepting Mrs. Davis, went to live in Canada, and they still live there. At the head of this family is Mrs. Howell, the mother of Mrs. Davis, and with her is a younger sister of the latter who is unmarried. The Davis family consists of 2 boys and 1 girl, all young, the eldest, a boy, not being over 14 years of age. With Mr. Davis, there's a young child not included in the above list. Mrs. Howell is a tall, stately old lady of about 60 years of age. She has brilliant black eyes, good features, and looks a little sallow from her age. Her hair is gray and still thick, and she wears nothing on her head. This gives her an air of dignity and simplicity. In manner, she is very affable and plain. Miss Howell, whose first name is Margaret, is a tall young lady of about 20 years of age. She has dark eyes, good features, and a clear olive complexion, with dark brown hair. In manner, she is pleasing, and there is a strong resemblance between her and her mother. The looks of both ladies are quite Southern. Master Jefferson Davis is a fine boy of about 14 years of age. He is tall for his age and well made, with dark hair, dark eyes, and good features. His skin is a rich brown, like that of all his family. He is now in college in Lennoxville, Canada East. Miss Margaret Davis is a girl of about 8 years of age with eyes black as, I can't read that word because it's missing part of the first letter, and brown hair and good features. Her skin is a rich olive, like that of Mrs. Howell, her aunt. She is now at school in the Convent of the Sacred Heart near Montreal. The last of the family to notice is Master William Davis, who goes by the name of Willie. He is a boy of 4 years of age with gray eyes and light hair, and features promising to be aquiline like those of his father. He is deaf, so that one has to shout at him in speaking. All right, so this is where I'm going to stop reading the article so we can go ahead and analyze it, although I must admit the rest of the article is very interesting. So let's break this down. Mrs. Howell is mother to two daughters, Mrs. Davis and Margaret. Mrs. Davis is Jefferson Davis's wife. As I mentioned previously, Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. Okay, so the Davis family consists of two boys, one girl, and one other child. We saw that Mrs. Howell is listed as being a tall, stately old lady of about 60 years of age. She has brilliant black eyes, good features, and looks a little sallow from age. Remember, sallow means a yellowish complexion. Her hair was iron gray and still thick. Then there is Miss Howell, whose first name is Margaret. She is listed as a tall young lady of about 20 years. She has dark eyes, good features, and a clear olive complexion with dark brown hair. Then the article says that there is a strong resemblance between her and her mother, and also that the looks of both ladies are quite Southern. So how I interpret the phrase looking quite Southern means many Southern women at that time had dark eyes, dark hair, and complexions that are sallow and olive. Sallow meaning yellow and olive meaning brown. All right, so let's get to the other children. The article says Master Jefferson Davis was a fine boy of 14 years of age. He is tall for his age and well made, with dark hair, dark eyes, and good features. His skin is a rich brown, like that of all his family. Folks, is that sinking in? I'm going to go ahead and repeat that last part, like that of all his family. So let's go ahead and look at the next child, which is Miss Margaret Davis. She was a girl of 8 years of age, with eyes black as unreadable, and brown hair and good features. Her skin is a rich olive, like that of Miss Howell, her aunt. All right, so let me reiterate what I just said. I said a rich olive, okay? They didn't say regular olive, a rich olive, which means it's an enhanced color, a darker color. All right, so looking at the last child, Master William Davis, he is 4 years of age with gray eyes and light hair, and features promising to be aquiline like his father. He is also deaf. Wow, right? Weren't we taught that the Southern Confederacy was basically all white? Weren't we all told that only white people were in charge of the South? Aren't 99% of all the photos and paintings that we're shown in regards to the Southern Confederacy of white people? I'm not making this stuff up, folks. But there is a reason it's been left out of the curriculum. What I'm showing you here is that Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, had a black family. Let that sit with you for a minute. Remember, when I read the description of Master Jefferson Davis, the 14-year-old, it says he has a rich brown, not a light brown, not a sallow, a rich brown complexion like that of all his family. Please remember, words are key. That's why I'm emphasizing these important descriptive words so that it really brings home what this family looked like. Folks, this war was not about black and white. This war was a fight about cultures, money, and power. Southern black men, black women, white men, and white women were fighting for their way of life. Of course, I think it was disgusting to fight to keep the institution of slavery. These people and that part of their culture were sick, but that was part of the Southern culture at that time. What I'm saying to you is, we have been lied to regarding who these people were and who had the power at that time in history. The reality was, the South was full of families of color that were wealthy plantation owners, statesmen, bankers, doctors, preachers, teachers, soldiers, farmers, etc. This is not to say the South was not overrun with Negroes that were enslaved. However, as I will explain later in the video, and I'm sure I've touched on it in prior videos, Europeans of color at this time were not to be confused with American Negroes, aka Indians. I have over 25 articles of accounts of wealthy colored people and families in the South and Midwest, and that's not including wealthy families of color in the northern and western parts of the country. I will have to do a video on those wealthy families of color in the very near future. Also, these photos we are shown today are not legitimate. These photos we are shown have been substituted by photos of white people. I think some folks watching my videos believe the photos and paintings of white people that I present are of people of color passing for white. That is not the case. The reason I show you these photos are to highlight and emphasize the contradictions between the descriptions that are written and the photos we are given representing these various historical figures. I believe the original photos and paintings, etc., have been destroyed or hidden away. Maybe that's one of the reasons why many southern states passed laws against Negroes learning to read. I just wanted to clear up this issue about photos I'm presenting going forward. Okay, I'm going to move on to another article, and this one is about Verena Davis, the wife of Jefferson Davis. This article is from the Army.mil website. Basically, it's the U.S. Army's website. Anyway, this article was published on January 30th, 2015 by Eric Durr, New York State Division of Military and Naval Affairs. All right, so this article reads, Saratoga Springs, New York, October 8th, 2014. A university professor who is also a former government codebreaker and a retired college financial aid director teamed up to transcribe and decode the secrets in a 150-year-old Confederate diary discovered in the collections of the New York State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs, New York. The Military Museum is administered by the New York State Division of Military and Naval Affairs, the state agency which oversees the New York Army and Air National Guard. Written in 1863 and 1864 by Confederate Army Lieutenant James Malbone, an officer in Company B, 6th Virginia Infantry, the diary records information about soldiers in his unit, items he's bought and sold, his African-American slaves, the faithfulness of other officers' wives, Confederate deserters, women, and military movements. You know, before I go forward reading this, I just wanted to comment where it says African-American slaves. Obviously, back in 1863 and 1864, the term African-American obviously was not used. But it also indicates that these folks writing this story want to portray that the people of color at that time were all from Africa. And that is far from the truth, as we are witnessing by all the videos that I'm producing, as well as other videos being produced that pertain to the same subjects. In essence, it's a way of disassociating European people of color from their heritage and American Negroes/Indians from their land. To keep some of this private, Malbone used a code of letters and symbols. Among that coded information is Malbone's speculation about race of Varina Davis, the wife of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Encoded in his diary, Malbone recorded that he saw her and that she was dark-complected and had a very, very brown skin, dark eyes, and high cheekbones, wide mouth. This was undoubtedly a reference to African-American features and possibly ancestry, said Dr. Kent Boaklin, who broke the code. Again, you can see that reference to African-American. All right, so it goes on to read further. In the slave-owning Confederacy of 1864, these musings would have been explosive statements, said Boaklin, a Queens College associate professor of computer science and National Security Agency trained cryptographer. Boaklin, who has decrypted other historic documents, said people used codes in their diaries to keep military information, gossip, and ruminations about sex a secret from prying eyes. Malbone's diary contained a little of each. So I'm not going to read the entire article. I just wanted to read the section on Varina Davis because the first article I read to you didn't specifically describe her appearance. But now you know how her children got their looks. All right, so back to this article. Do you see where it says Malbone recorded that he saw her and she was dark-complected and had very, very brown skin, dark eyes, high cheekbones, and a wide mouth? Now, they're saying that this was a reference to her African-American features and possibly ancestry. However, I hope if you've been watching my video series, you realize that she probably came from a European family of color. There is also a possibility that she was mixed with indigenous American blood, aka Indian blood. So let's take a look at what photos Google has for Mrs. Davis. Let's see if they portray her with this very, very brown skin. These photos aren't even close to matching the description. So let's take a look at the Davis family children. I sure don't see a rich olive or rich brown skin on any of them. Maybe it's just me, but do you guys see it? All I see are very pale complexions. Let's look at a painting of Varina Davis in a pendant from the Smithsonian Museum. Again, do you see a very, very brown skin? How about a brown skin? How about a light brown skin? This is what I'm trying to reveal to you. These paintings, photos are all bogus. All right, so let's look at one more example of what Mrs. Jefferson Davis looked like. This page comes from the book, The Davis Memorial Volume, Our Dead President, Jefferson Davis, The World's Tribute to His Memory by J. William Jones, D.D., copyright 1889. All right, going to page 313. This page goes on to read, Mr. Davis was received here with distinguished honors, and quarters were assigned him at the Spotswood Hotel, which then stood at the southeast corner of Main and 8th Streets, but was destroyed by fire December 25, 1870. Here speeches were made, welcome after welcome extended, and crowds pressed forward to be introduced to Mr. Davis and the members of his family. Mrs. Davis was thus described. She is a tall, commanding figure with dark hair, eyes, and complexion, and strongly marked characteristics which lie chiefly in the mouth. With firmly set yet flexible lips, there is indicated much energy of purpose and will, but beautifully softened by the usual sad expression of her dark, earnest eyes. Her manners are kind, graceful, easy, and affable, and her receptions are characterized by the dignity, suavity, which should very properly distinguish the drawing room entertainments of the chief magistrate of a republic. So again, we can see that the author describes Mrs. Davis as tall, with dark hair, eyes, and complexion, three separate categories regarding her appearance. Well, there are many more written examples of what Verena Davis looked like, but now I want to move on to some more Confederates of color. All right, so let's look at the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander H. Stephens. And this article comes from the Athens Weekly Banner, dated January 24th, 1908, page 3, first column. This article is titled Civilian Leaders of the Confederacy by John Good of Virginia, sometimes member of the Confederate Congress of the Virginia Session Convention of the Congress of the United States and President of the Virginia Constitutional Convention of 1901-1902. The article subheading reads Alexander H. Stephens, and the article goes on to read, the first I ever saw of Mr. Stephens was on the 22nd day of April, 1861. He had been sent as a commissioner by the government at Montgomery to negotiate a treaty of alliance, offensive and defensive, with the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I had the honor to represent the convention as a member of the committee appointed to receive him. It will be remembered that Virginia was, for a short time, an independent nation. She had seceded from the old nation, but had not accepted the new one, nor could she do so until a vote was had by the people upon the ratification or rejection of the ordinance of secession. Mr. Stephens impressed me at the time as a most remarkable man. In personal appearance, he was very slender, his complexion was swarthy, and he weighed less than 100 pounds. He had a metallic voice of far-reaching power and a wonderful penetration. All right, for the sake of time, let's just get to the heart of it. Of course, this account takes place before Alexander H. Stephens becomes Vice President of the Confederacy. So John Good, the author of the article, states that he met with Mr. Stephens and he described his personal appearance as very slender and his complexion was swarthy. In my opinion, the author didn't mention his hair color or eye color, but went right for the distinguishing feature, which was his complexion, aka skin color. All right, so let's look at a photo of Alexander H. Stephens. This one was found on Google. Not seeing the swarthy complexion? Don't you all find it weird so far that these descriptions are published in many sources, but as I mentioned in previous videos, no one talks about these people's descriptions, only their deeds. Although, if they did happen to mention their descriptions, for some reason, and I say this facetiously, they generally talk about hair color and eye color, failing to mention their complexions, skin color, or hue. Maybe it's just that they don't want to get into a discussion about it. All right, I'm going to take us away from these articles for a minute, so I can show you real quick that Mr. Stephens' swarthy complexion, and basically all swarthy complexions, generally refer to complexions assigned to people of color. Let me show you real quick what I mean. Again, I'm going to preface this. I'm not speaking about white people with tans. There's a huge difference, and as Judge Judy says, let's not play with each other. Now, I have plenty of viewers commenting on various videos stating that swarthy complexions are not assigned to people of color. They believe that swarthy complexions refer to either white people with dark hair and dark eyes, or white people that have tans from being outdoors. I'm not blaming these commenters for believing as they do, because they have been subject to the same rewritten history we all have been taught. However, I'm going to debunk that false narrative right now. I'm going to go through a couple examples real quick. Let's look at this article from the Indianapolis Journal dated July 12, 1895, page 4, fifth column, under the title, About People and Things. Beginning in the third paragraph, it states, Mrs. Anna R. Woodby of Omaha, described as a swarthy colored woman, has been named by the prohibitionists as one of the candidates for the regents of the state university. Now, this next article is from the Indianapolis newspaper dated September 10th, 1891, page 2, fourth column. The title of this article is The Asphalt-Colored Hands Demand $1.75 per day for their labor. So the paragraph begins, at 1 o'clock today, about 100 swarthy Negro laborers employed to lay concrete work on the Virginia Avenue asphalt pavement threw down their tools and quit work. Okay, moving on. You'll love this one. This article is from the Savannah Morning newspaper dated February 21st, 1904, page 30, second to last column. The title of this article is The Romantic Story of the Douglas Family. I'm going to skip down to the 5th paragraph where it reads, being desirous of seeing the one who had done so signaling a service, the man was pointed out to the king by his color or complexion. In these words of the Gaelic tongue, Sholtol de Glass, or behold the swarthy colored man. Hence he was named Sholtol the Douglas. The king royally rewarded him with grants of land and created him Lord of Douglas. Well, that was interesting, don't you think? Keep in mind, this is a major Southern newspaper in Georgia, and it's 1904. Okay, so this next article is from the Durham Daily Globe, dated October 23rd, 1893, page 1, 3rd column. The title of this article is People Who Come and Go, Brief Brevities of Interest to All Readers of the Globe. Skipping down to the 3rd paragraph, it reads, Solomon Justice, another swarthy African, was charged with violating a city ordinance, but was not found guilty, so went on his way rejoicing. Again, this is another Southern newspaper, this one from Durham, North Carolina, in the year 1893. Here's the last example I'm going to share, because I want to get back to the main subject of this video. This article is from the New Albany Daily Ledger, dated May 19, 1860, page 2, 2nd column. This short article reads, it appears that the contest for vice president in the Republican convention was between Hannibal Hamlin and Cassius M. Clay, and the former succeeded. This was natural, we suppose. Hannibal of old, in whose honor Hamlin was named, was a swarthy African, while Cassius was nothing but a Roman and a white man. So let's look at this. According to this editor, and I've read this before, Hannibal Hamlin, Abraham Lincoln's vice president, was named after a swarthy African. Why would you name a white man after a black man? Well, if you've seen my prior video, I assert that Hamlin was a black man. You also saw where the editor states, this was natural, we suppose. I believe he made that statement because Hamlin was black, but also because black men were numerous in the Republican Party at that time. So basically the editor jumps to a conclusion thinking that Hamlin was only voted in by the Republican Party at the convention because he not only is a black man, but he has a black man's name, where his opponent was named after a white man, so of course they're not going to choose him. So why would this editor have this sarcastic view? Well, here's an interesting fact, and I did a little digging. According to the Carnegie Center for Arts and History, they state that this newspaper editor sided heavily with the Southern cause, yet he still assigned the term swarthy to an African man. So my whole point here with these particular articles is to point out that the term swarthy was used to describe dark-skinned people, whether they be Africans, Europeans of color, or any dark-skinned individuals. Okay, as always, I have plenty more examples of the term swarthy describing people of color, but the video must go on. Okay, so let's move on to the next article. And this one is from the Cincinnati Daily Commercial Newspaper, dated October 20th, 1865, page 2. The title of this article is Alexander H. Stephens, the ex-rebel vice president, and John H. Reagan in the metropolis, Mr. Stephens' appearance, future movements of the party. This article starts out, Alexander H. Stephens, ex-vice president of the Confederate States, accompanied by his brother, Judge Linton Stephens, who remained 6 weeks imprisoned with him in Fort Warren, and ex-Postmaster General John H. Reagan arrived in this city last evening on the 8 o'clock train and put up at the Astor House. Okay, I'm going to skip down to the next paragraph that reads, John Reagan, his companion and fellow sufferer in the same cause, in appearance is the real type of true Southern gentleman. He is tall and commanding in form, we should say 6 feet in height, with an uncommonly well-built frame, and head well balanced on shoulders that Apollo might envy, with dark brown hair within a shade of black, a full beard and mustache of the same color, a dark complexion and flashing black eyes that set off admirably by their brightness their dark surroundings. Reagan is what the world would call a handsome man. Unfortunately, this article describes Alexander H. Stephens in every way except his complexion. Fortunately, we've learned that his complexion was swarthy from the previous article. And might I add, we have now confirmed who swarthy pertains to. Okay, so what I've gleaned from this article is that John H. Reagan was the Postmaster General for the Confederacy under Jefferson Davis. We also see that he is described as the real type of Southern gentleman. So in my mind, that means he looks like the typical Southerner of that era. So let me get back to his description that makes him the real type of Southern gentleman. The article describes John H. Reagan as tall and commanding in form, 6 feet in height, uncommonly well-built frame, head well balanced on shoulders that Apollo might envy, dark brown hair within a shade of black, a full beard and mustache of the same color, a dark complexion, and flashing black eyes that set off admirably by their brightness, their dark surroundings. Regan is what the world would call a handsome man. Now, look at the photos I found for him. Where is the dark complexion? How are his eyes set off by the dark surroundings? What I do hear is that Southern gentlemen have dark complexions, something that I was never told in school. Now, there is one more person in the article. His name is John Linton Stevens, Alexander H. Stevens' brother. He was a Supreme Court Justice for the state of Georgia. Let's take a look at his description. All right, so this paragraph starts off, Judge Linton Stevens, brother to the late Vice President, is a very fine-looking man of full habit and ruddy complexion, and the last man who would be taken as the brother of Alexander. One would take him to be a well-to-do New England farmer rather than a Southern gentleman of leisure, with plantations by the 100 acres. All right, so looking at this, Judge Stevens has a ruddy complexion, who apparently resembles a New England farmer rather than a Southern gentleman of leisure. Okay, real quick, ruddy is a reddish-brown color. I think that in modern times we have been led to believe ruddy complexions are of white people with some rosacea issues. That is not a complexion. Look at this photo of what I mean by rosacea. And remember, the term complexion denotes the skin on your entire face and generally your body. I had several people comment on previous videos regarding the definition of a ruddy complexion, saying it was like a reddish-brown color. I would tend to agree. However, just like the word brunette, the meaning was unofficially changed in the early to mid-1900s to validate the rewritten history we were all taught. Now, I hate to go off on a tangent again, but I feel like we're going to have those same commenters that believe white people are swarthy use the same rewritten history to say that the term dark complexion always pertains to white people. Let me quickly dispel that notion. So this first article comes from the Milledgeville Confederate Union newspaper dated September 6, 1864, page 1, second column. The ad states, "Stop the runaway. Runaway from Macon, Georgia on the 14th day of July instant. A Negro boy named Charles, aged 20 years, 5 feet 10 inches, dark complexion, flat nose, and weighs about 165 to 175 pounds. I will pay a suitable reward for his delivery to me at this place, or his confinement until I get to him." All right, so this next article is from the Augusta Weekly Chronicle and Sentinel, dated March 5th, 1856, page 6, last column. The title of this ad is Public Sales, Burke Sheriff's Sale. And as you can see, it's a long list of Negroes for sale. I'm not actually going to read the whole list because that would take too long, but feel free to pause the video and you can read the list for yourself. All right, so it goes on to read, will be sold on the first Tuesday. Unfortunately, I can't read that part because it's messed up, but it picks up in said county within the legal hours of sale. The following property, to wit, one Negro man slave named Stephen, about 25 years old, of a dark complexion, one Negro woman slave named Viney, about 22 years old, and her 2 children, all of light complexion, one Negro boy slave named Gus, about 11 years old, light complexion, one Negro boy slave named Boston, 9 years old, dark complexion, one Negro slave named Fanny, about 25 years old, dark complexion, one Negro woman slave named Harriet, about 30 years old, and her 3 children, names and ages unknown. Bill, a boy about 8 years old, Carter, a boy 6 years old, both of the last mentioned of a dark complexion. Charles, a man about 32 years old, dark complected. Aaron, a man about 45 years old, light complected. Abraham, a man about 45 years old, dark complected. Nicholas, a man about 45 years old, light complected. Millie, a woman about 44 years old, light complected. Harry, a man about 34 years old, dark complected. King, a man about 30 years old, light complected. Western, a boy about 5 years old, dark complexion. Clay, a boy about 12 years old, dark complexion. Taylor, a boy about 10 years old, dark complexion. Doc, a boy about 8 years old, light complexion. Nick, a boy about 6 years old, light complexion. Moselle, a girl about 1 year old, light complexion. First of all, this turns my stomach. This is what we refer to as human trafficking today, but a lot worse. Unfortunately, history is filled with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, so looking at this list, we can see 2 main complexions attributed to these people referred to as Negroes, dark complexions and light complexions. Do those complexions look familiar? They should, because they mean the same thing, black people, aka people of color. I want to bring your attention to another point that's quite obvious to me now, After researching for several years and listening to other researchers, generally, when I see the word Negro in literature from the 1600s to the late 1800s, the term Negro was assigned to the indigenous population of America, aka Indians, or the indigenous population of the Caribbean. Most often, Negroes were given first names, or they assigned themselves a first name. This is how you will most often see them referred to. They generally did not have last names. They obviously had indigenous names, but of course those were probably too hard for Europeans to pronounce. Plus, psychologically, I'm sure it was an attempt to break them mentally from their culture. So, in my opinion, to facilitate that mental break, they were only given first names. I will tell you this, Europeans generally felt that the indigenous aka Negroes were savages, no more than animal. Of course, there are always the exceptions to the rule. There were plenty of marriages that occurred between the two cultures. However, this loathing Europeans had was evident in the countless literary works published over the centuries. Europeans would never give Indians their last names. This was a ridiculous notion. Europeans prided themselves when it came to their family names and family crests. When you do read about a Negro with a first name and last name, generally it was because they were a runaway, posing as a freedman or a European of color. Often when seeing runaway ads, you will see it say something like, runaway Negro, calling themselves, insert first name, insert last name. Or there were plenty of instances where free Europeans of color were kidnapped from a non-slave state and forced down south and sold into slavery. So please, wake up and smell what's cooking. The reason this propaganda was put into the rewritten history was to again validate why so many black people have European names. Alright, I hope you start understanding the sheer magnitude of this research. Alright, are you saying WTF to yourself yet? If not, you might after this next article. Let's take a look at one of the most exalted Confederate generals, Robert E. Lee. So for this gentleman, and I say that loosely, we go to the United States of America Congressional Record. It's titled Proceedings and Debate of the 90th Congress, Second Session, Volume 114, Part 7, March 28, 1968 to April 9, 1968, by the Government Printing Office, Washington. Okay, so why did I read you that long title? I read it to you because this is the Congressional Record, an excellent primary source, and they are discussing Robert E. Lee's family line. So on page 8727, they are speaking about Richard Lee, who was the first Lee in America. He was the sixth generation ancestor of Robert E. Lee. Now, turning the page to 8728, it goes on to read, Richard's descendants prospered through the following century until the time of the Revolution. There were no more illustrious names in the annals of the new republic than the Lees, except that of Washington himself. Such Lees as Richard, Henry, Arthur, Thomas, William, Francis, and Lightfoot were men of station, ability, wealth, and integrity. Two were signers of the Declaration of Independence. The list of members of Congress, governors of Virginia, and other holders of public office was endless. Young Robert E. Lee grew up in the midst of this tradition. Robert E. Lee decided on a military career at a very early age. In fact, as a young boy, he decided he would go to West Point. He finally ended up there when he was 18 in 1825. When he entered West Point, he had brown hair, a dark complexion, gray eyes, he was 5'10", and weighed 180 pounds. Robert E. Lee was the son of Henry, Light Horse Harry, Lee of Revolutionary War renown. It was he who coined the patriotic phrase with reference to Washington, first in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen. So we can see here that Robert E. Lee was described as having dark brown hair, a dark complexion, gray eyes, and he was 5'10" and weighed 180 pounds. So we can see that he is described with three main categories: dark hair, dark complexion, and gray eyes. That said, looking at photos of General Lee, where's the dark complexion? I don't see it. The real question is, where are all the real photos of all the people that I'm presenting? As I've said in other videos that I've made regarding people of color, Robert didn't develop this dark complexion on his own. It was obviously passed down by his father, mother, or both. All right, are you guys ready to continue down the rabbit hole? Here we go. Now, let's take a look at Alfred Lee. This article comes from the Chicago Tribune dated July 20th, 1868, page 2, column 4. All right, so this paragraph starts off, Alfred Lee, the wealthy colored man who lately died at Georgetown, D.C., was the half-brother of General Robert E. Lee, the leader of the rebel armies and the president of Washington College. So, did that get your attention? Not only was this man colored and wealthy, He was General Lee's half-brother. The Civil War ended approximately 4 years prior to his death. Folks, I'm trying to tell you something here with these videos. The information is right in front of us. We have been lied to. I know it's hard to digest, but it's in black and white. No pun intended, of course. Okay, heavy stuff, right? So let's keep going on to the next Southern Confederate of color. All right, so this article comes from the Philadelphia Inquirer, dated August 23rd, 1889, page 4, column 5. And this article goes on to read, a light, wiry, gray-haired little man with gray chin beard and a brown complexion, registered at the Lafayette yesterday with his wife. The name he signed was James All Chalmers, Sardis, Mississippi. General Chalmers is pretty well known to the people of this country. He was a Confederate brigadier and a fire eater of the old regime. His connection with the Fort Pillow massacre is historical and has often been a subject of congressional debate. General Chalmers represented the celebrated shoestring district of Mississippi for several terms as a Democrat, though the white voters were outnumbered by the colored 5-1. When he was left out by his old party, he managed to get the Republican nomination. He claims to have been elected, although his opponent got their certificate. The general will contest. So this article is describing James All Chalmers, who was a Confederate brigadier general from Sardis, Mississippi. The article describes General Chalmers as a light, wiry, gray-haired little man with gray chin beard and a brown complexion. Okay, so this man had gray hair and beard, yet his complexion is still brown. I hope you're hearing me. Again, he had a brown complexion, not light brown, not tawny or sallow, brown. Okay, there was one other thing in that article that I thought was very important. It mentioned that white voters were outnumbered by colored 5-1. To me, it sounds like a real motive for white supremacists to try to take over, because guess what? Colored people had the right to vote after the Civil War, and they were going to get outvoted every time. So what do you think they did? And this outnumbering in Sardis, Mississippi was not exclusive to them. It was all over the South. So in response, they formed the White Leagues and the KKK. Now, unfortunately, I can't get into this right now, but I will be doing a video addressing this very issue. All right, so let's keep marching on to the next Confederate general. All right, so this article is from the Cumberland Daily Times, dated May 18th, 1887, page 3, column 5. This article is titled General Joe Wheeler, His Reminiscence of the Fall of the Confederacy. And the article starts off, I had a chat with General Joe Wheeler the other day. He now represents one of the northern congressional districts of Alabama in the House of Representatives, and he is one of the most striking characters in the South. He is short and slim, nervous and wiry, and he does not weigh, all told, over 125 pounds. He has black hair, a dark complexion, bright black eyes, and a full black beard, into which the gray is fast creeping. He dresses in dark clothes and wears his Prince Albert coat buttoned tightly around his little frame, making it look smaller than ever. He apparently does not care much for dress, and he wears a soft hat which he now crowds upon his head, now sticks in the pocket of his overcoat, and now carries about under his arm. He is a very popular man among his fellows, has nothing of the snob about him, and is as pleasant a conversationalist as you will find among public men. So, as you can see, General Wheeler was described as a short and slim, nervous and wiry. He weighed 125 pounds. He has black hair, a dark complexion, bright black eyes, and full black beard. The author was very descriptive. Black hair, dark complexion, black eyes, and beard. Note that complexion is in its own category. All right, so this next piece of evidence comes from the book A Long Shadow, Jefferson Davis in the Final Days of the Confederacy, page 38. This book was authored by Michael B. Ballard, and the paragraph reads, Judah P. Benjamin, the only cabinet member who had not been at church services that morning, was probably the first to arrive at the meeting, for he was already in his office, only a few feet from Davis's, when the president arrived. He had spent most of the previous evening packing documents to be shipped south in case of an emergency. Adjutant General Samuel Cooper, who considered the threat to Richmond no matter of levity, had been outraged to find Benjamin singing and whistling to entertain those who worked with him. The Secretary of State had an irresponsible sense of humor and a keen mind. Now 53, he had had a successful legal and political career in Louisiana before the war and was the first professing Jew to be elected to the United States Senate. Benjamin had served the Confederacy as Attorney General and Secretary of War before becoming Secretary of State in 1862, and his actions had often been controversial. Yet there was probably no one in the government that Jefferson Davis trusted more. Benjamin was short, swarthy, and stocky. Well, we can see a few surprises in this selection, right? First of all, Judah sounds like he was Jefferson Davis's trusted advisor. However, he was also his Attorney General and Secretary of War. Secondly, he was a Jew. Now, some of you know that Jews in literature are always being referred to as being black in the past, prior to the 1900s. I have had several subscribers ask me to create a video on black Jews, and I plan to do so. And finally, we can see that Judah Benjamin was described as short, swarthy, and stocky. Actually, there's a fourth element I want to highlight. Isn't it ironic that the President of the Confederacy's closest confidant was a black Jew? Just saying. Because aren't the white supremacists today always hating on blacks and Jews? We've been misled, folks. Alrighty then, moving on. Now I've shown you the black leadership of the Confederacy. I hope you don't think the troops they commanded were all white. So let's take a look at some of the troops. Alright, so this article comes from the Daily Intelligencer, dated December 25th, 1862, page 4, column 5. This article talks about the 1st Virginia Volunteer Infantry by company. It goes on to read, "The following soldiers are reported absent without leave. They will return immediately to duty, or if arrested, they will be treated as deserters. Major and Provost Marshal General for Virginia." And just as a side note, I like military roles because they tend to be very descriptive. As you're going to see, the soldiers that deserted are described in detail. Why? Because they want to know exactly what they look like, especially their complexions. Obviously, you could have 2 or more people with the same name, so telling them apart is much easier when you know their complexions. Have you ever noticed in modern times, government driver's licenses, IDs, passports don't have complexion as a descriptor? That's because they have color photos now that show someone's complexion. Okay, so back to the article. These soldiers I presented thus far in the video are all of European heritage, some colored and some white. Some of these soldiers may be listed as having a light complexion. That's different than a fair or pale complexion. Light complexions, as you've seen, refer to people we call light-skinned black people today. Remember, it's all about the complexion. All right, so under the first company, Company A, we have William Maxwell, private, age 34 years, eyes gray, hair black, complexion dark, height 5 feet 9 3/4 inches, occupation a mariner. Under Company C, the first soldier is white, Henry Brooks, private, age 22 years, eyes brown, hair black, complexion fair, height 5 feet 11 inches, occupation farmer. So from this point, I'm only going to read off the soldiers of color. All right, so still in Company C, we have Samuel Chase, eyes brown, hair brown, complexion dark, occupation farmer. Samuel Stillwagoner, eyes blue, hair light, complexion dark, occupation farmer. Henry Stillwagoner, eyes brown, hair brown, complexion dark, occupation miner. Those last 2 are probably brothers. Both have dark complexions. All right, moving on. Company D, George W. Howard, eyes gray, hair black, complexion light, occupation farmer. Martin Birch, eyes black, hair light, complexion dark, occupation farmer. Company E, Benjamin Rhine, eyes gray, hair dark, complexion dark, occupation steamboatman. Perry Baldwin, eyes brown, hair black, complexion dark, occupation farmer. Patrick Aho, eyes brown, hair black, complexion dark, occupation boiler. Thomas Gardner, eyes black, dark hair, complexion dark, occupation farmer. David Householder, eyes gray, hair light, complexion light, occupation laborer. James Cahoe, eyes brown, hair brown, complexion dark, occupation boiler. Henry Farnsworth, blue eyes, hair auburn, complexion light, occupation cooper. Company H, Jeremiah Ney, eyes brown, hair black, complexion dark, occupation farmer. William Shepard, eyes gray, hair black, complexion dark, occupation farmer. Joshua Hickok, eyes, hair black, complexion dark, occupation farmer. Jonathan Barker, eyes black, hair black, complexion dark, occupation farmer. Abner Minor, eyes brown, hair black, complexion dark, occupation farmer. Company I, William Bednell, eyes dark, hair dark, complexion light, occupation coal miner. Company K, George M.V. Pierce, eyes blue, hair dark, complexion dark, occupation laborer. William Kirkland, eyes black, hair black, complexion dark, occupation farmer. Okay, that took a little bit of time, but as I mentioned, complexion tells the story. There were 34 soldiers listed in this article. 21 of them are men of color. That tells me something. These soldiers were from Georgia, and a majority of these men were of color. That gives me insight into how many soldiers of color were fighting for the Confederacy. Again, please hear me. The Civil War was not about oppressing people based on complexion. It was about culture, power, and money. All right, let's take another look at the list of soldiers. And this list was published in the Athens Southern Banner newspaper, dated January 14, 1863, page 7, column 3. This article reads, $990 reward, headquarters, Camp of Instruction, Camp Randolph, Decatur, Georgia, December 9, 1862. A reward of $30 will be paid for the apprehension and delivery at this camp of any one of the following named deserters. For the sake of time, I'm just going to go down the list faster than I did on the first one. I'm going to read off the name and then their complexion. All right, first we have James Massey, dark complexion. James S. Ayers, dark complexion. Lewis Walker, ruddy complexion. Thomas B. Powell, pale complexion. Michael Spain, dark complexion. Thomas Townsend, ruddy complexion. J. Madison Brownlee, dark complexion. Michael Hoynes, dark complexion. Michael Sullivan, florid complexion. Thomas E. Ballou, dark complexion. E.B. Ridgway, dark complexion. J.N. Johnson, dark complexion. William G. Cannon, fair complexion. James D. Walker, ruddy complexion. Hannes W. Fuller, dark complexion. James W. Dooley, ruddy complexion. William Bennett, dark complexion. James P. Shirley, light complexion. Azara Fuller, light complexion. F. M. Eaton, dark complexion. Alexander Ugly, dark complexion. Andrew J. Apington, light complexion. John Webb, fair complexion. Neil McCannon, dark complexion. Benjamin Franklin, light complexion. George W. Arnold, dark complexion. Michael Conway, ruddy complexion. George Sullivan, light complexion. James Cummings, light complexion. John Briggs, dark complexion. David Norris, dark complexion. J. W. Rucker, dark complexion. Okay, so we have 32 soldiers listed. Of the 32 soldiers, 17 have dark complexions, 6 have light complexions, 5 have ruddy complexions, 2 have fair complexions, and 1 has a pale complexion. And then there's another one with a florid complexion. So that means of the whole list, only 4 of the soldiers were white. Now, you might say to yourself, these soldiers of color were deserting in much higher numbers than the white soldiers. They must have been afraid to fight. If that was the case or not, the numbers were higher for them because they were the majority of the enlisted soldiers. Okay, so now I'm going to make a comparison. Stay with me now. Keep in mind all of the soldiers' complexions that I read off to you. I have just shown you the same complexions assigned to enslaved people from the same state, the state of Georgia, at approximately the same time period. Why am I showing you this? It's to prove to you that these complexions assigned to these soldiers that rewritten history has told us are white is BS. These soldiers with the same complexions as Negroes were black, aka colored people. Something else that stood out to me while researching these Confederate soldiers was that we were all taught, as I mentioned previously, that people of color were regulated to fight in their own separate units, and I'm speaking exclusively about the Union soldiers. When it came to the Confederacy, we were taught that there were very few people of color that fought for the Confederacy. However, the few that did so at the behest of their slave masters. This, of course, was another lie. Okay, so let's quickly look at these 2 ads regarding Negroes from Georgia. All right, so this first ad comes from the Atlanta Weekly Intelligencer newspaper dated February 10th, 1859, page 7, column 4. The title reads, Fulton Mortgage Sheriff Sale, and the ad begins, will be sold on the first Tuesday of April next before the courthouse door in the city of Atlanta between the legal hours of sale, the following property, to wit, a Negro woman of dark complexion by the name of Isabel, about 16 years of age, and her child, a boy, named John, about 10 months old, of dark complexion. Now, as you can see, both the Negro woman named Isabel and her child, John, are listed as having dark complexions. All right, so moving on to the second example, and this one is from the Augusta Daily Chronicle and Sentinel, dated November 6, 1860, page 2, column 5. All right, so the title is ad is $20 reward. And it goes on to read, runaway from the plantation of the late Edmund Beaudry of Columbia County, two Negro boys, Henry and Gary. Henry is about 20 years of age, 5 feet 10 inches, well built, and is very active, of a dark complexion, is probably lurking about Augusta. Gary is about 16 years of age, 5 feet 10 inches high, rather slender in his build, and of a dark complexion, no other mark recollected. So we can see two Negro boys, Henry and Gary, both listed with dark complexions. As I always say, I have many more examples. However, I'm doing my best to condense these videos down to a digestible amount of time. All right, so I hope you're seeing what I'm trying to explain to you regarding dark complexions, light complexions, swarthy complexions, and ruddy complexions. These are all complexions that describe people of color. Okay, so let me wrap up this video with some quick insights to help you get a better understanding of where I'm going with my video series. All right, so I'm going to give you the 1,000-foot view of this video I've produced. The United States of America prior to the late 19th century, meaning the late 1800s, went into high gear with white supremacy. This was not by coincidence, this was a plan. There was a white supremacist group called the White League, which formed starting in Louisiana, along with the Ku Klux Klan that sprang up and started taking hold all over the South. Why? Because many whites were poor and tired of people of color running things. Now I realize if you haven't seen my other videos leading up to this one, the statement I just made regarding people of color running things will not make any sense and may even sound foolish. But that's only because you haven't seen my previous video. Please do me a favor before you start commenting saying things like, this guy's crazy or this guy's a few sandwiches short of a picnic. My videos build on each other, so go check them out. Okay, so back to what I was saying. Because of Reconstruction, not only did Europeans of color retain power, the other people of color, i.e. the Negroes, meaning the indigenous and the indigenous from the Caribbean, now were able to vote, acquire land, sue white people in court, and have protections under the Constitution. People of color outnumbered whites in many of the southern states. You might be asking yourself, how could people of color outnumber white people? Well, it was the combined populations of Europeans of color and Negroes, aka the indigenous populations. Because of these large majorities, voter suppression tactics were developed and utilized. The poor white people did not plan this takeover. The wealthy white people did. The poor whites just executed it and provided the muscle. They used violence, intimidation, and corruption to make it happen. The white elite no longer considered white a status. Now it was all about skin color. If you even looked like you had the blood of a colored person, or you were known to have come from a family of colored people, you were colored and considered the enemy. This takeover happened over a 25-year time period. Based on news articles, I estimate the timeline to have occurred towards the end of Reconstruction around 1875 to approximately 1924. This takeover included the reclassification process that was spearheaded by Walter Plecker in Virginia with the Racial Integrity Act, categorizing into two categories, white or colored. This way of thinking was pervasive and spread among the states. I will be producing some videos on the creation of the White League and the KKK in the future so that you can see that I'm spot on with my theory. Of course, as I've mentioned in previous videos, Woodrow Wilson and his administration put the final nail in the coffin for people of color. If you've seen my video called Prominent Americans You Assumed Are White, towards the end of that video, I touched on some of the damage Woodrow Wilson did to millions of U.S. citizens of color. I also showed how Princeton University remarked on the serious and long-lasting systemic damage Wilson did to people of color in the United States. I personally believe that historians at Princeton and other institutions of higher education understand to what extent Wilson and his sycophants went to suppress not only black people as a group, but their wealth and their role in European and American history. If this is the first video you've watched on my channel, please check out my other videos so the information will make more sense to you. One last thing. I didn't cover all of the Confederate leadership and soldiers of color in this video due to my own self-imposed time constraints. Also, I'm sure many of you are wondering, what was the deal with the Union Army and did they have any generals or soldiers of color? The answer is, of course they did. If you study the Civil War, you will come to understand that frequently there were members of the same family on both sides of the conflict. I'm going to produce a video on the Union Army in the very near future. I encourage you to start conducting your own research. Now that I've explained to you which complexions are attributed to people of color, you will start to understand who people of color were and the huge role they played in our history. Well, I would like to thank you for watching this video. I have many more coming your way, so please like and subscribe to my channel. so you will not miss any of my new videos. And thank you for watching.